Hello brothers and sisters, welcome to another episode here on Dangerous African Confessions HD. In this episode, we have a story from one of our dear sisters who discusses or shares with us about the kind of manipulations she has been through. She talks about how even a pastor had to have intimacy with her even in her pregnancy. This is another story of spiritual manipulation, control, and trickery of powerful spiritual leaders in the Christian faith. Let us now go into what our sister has for us today. Please subscribe if you haven't done so, and also do like and share this video, so others out there can also benefit from this conversation. Hit the notification bell as well, so you will be notified anytime we upload videos.
My name is Grace, and I must tell you, my brother, that I have carried this within me for years, a story weighed down by shame, regret, and lessons learned too late. And even before I go into what I want to share, I would like to state that, if you find yourself vulnerable, scared, or searching for answers, be careful where you place your trust. Because no human being should come between you and your relationship with God. My hope for doing this with you is that, by sharing my journey, I can spare someone else the pain I endured. I want to use my story as a reminder for everyone. Protect your heart, your mind, and your soul. They are precious beyond measure. You see, before everything unraveled, my life was full of promise. I was 28 years old, happily married to my husband Daniel, my best friend and the love of my life. We were eagerly anticipating the birth of our first child, a miracle we had prayed for. Our home was filled with dreams of the future, but beneath the surface, a shadow crept closer, one I never saw coming. My brother, the whole trouble began when I started having recurring nightmares. I would wake up trembling, heart pounding, unable to shake the sense of impending doom. These dreams, I will say, weren't just figments of my imagination, they were relentless and vivid, always centered around my unborn child. Soon after, I began experiencing physical symptoms, sleepless nights, unexplained weakness, and one terrifying episode of bleeding. My fear escalated into desperation. I wanted answers, and I wanted protection for my baby. It was during one of my sleepless nights that I confided in a close friend, Martha. You know, I don't blame her because I believe she also wanted to help me. The thing is that she was a kind-hearted woman but deeply entrenched in spiritual practices I didn't fully understand. When she heard about my struggles, she grew serious and told me that what I was going through was not something I can handle on my own. She told me I needed someone who can fight this battle spiritually. And that was when she spoke of a man named Prophet Elijah, someone she claimed had been instrumental in saving her cousin's marriage and another friend's child from a mysterious illness. Martha assured me that he was a man of God, someone with the power to see and confront spiritual forces. I agreed to meet him. Martha arranged the appointment and accompanied me to his church office, a modest but intimidating office. The first thing I noticed upon entering was the overwhelming sense of authority the place exuded. The walls were adorned with religious symbols, and a faint scent of incense lingered in the air. As we waited in his sparsely waiting room, I felt a mix of apprehension and hope. When the pastor finally appeared, I was struck by his presence. He was a tall, imposing figure with an intense gaze that seemed to pierce through me. He didn't smile, instead, he greeted us with a nod and gestured for me to sit. After a brief prayer, he turned his attention fully to me. Without asking any questions, he began to speak about my life. He mentioned details about my childhood, my struggles to conceive, and even specific arguments I'd had with Daniel, my husband. I was stunned about him knowing all these things. After having some conversation with me, then came the warning. He told me that there was a dark power pursuing me, one that sought to destroy my unborn child. He described it as a generational curse, something tied to my family's past. He then told me that it is not a battle of flesh and blood, and that it's spiritual warfare. He then said that if I don't act now, the consequences could be devastating. His words sent chills down my spine. I was terrified but also convinced that he held the key to my survival. He assured me that he could help, but it would require complete faith and obedience. He outlined a plan involving a series of cleansing rituals, prayers, and fasting. He emphasized the importance of secrecy, warning that speaking about these matters to anyone, even my husband, could weaken the spiritual shield he was building around me. At that moment, I felt trapped by my own fear. I agreed to everything he asked, desperate to protect my baby at any cost. So that day, he told me about our next meeting. He scheduled it for the following week. When the time came, I arrived at his office alone, as instructed. The session began with prayers and anointing oils, and though I didn't fully understand what was happening, I followed his every instruction. His demeanor was commanding but reassuring, and I felt a strange sense of safety in his presence. By the end of the session, brother, he told me that the dark power had been momentarily subdued but was growing stronger. And asked that we must act quickly, because it was only the beginning. Though it felt uncomfortable, I suppressed my doubts, reminding myself that this was for my child. Over time, he began to assert more control over my life. He instructed me to cut back on social interactions, warning that external influences could disrupt the spiritual work we were doing. You see, when you allow desperation to enter into your life, you will make mistakes that you might not even think it is a mistake. The reason is that he even criticized Daniel, suggesting that my husband's lack of spiritual insight was a vulnerability that the dark forces could exploit. And I also started to believe him, and my relationship with Daniel began to deteriorate. I stopped confiding in him, convinced that he wouldn't understand what I was going through. From that point on, my visits to his church place became more frequent. Each session grew more intense, involving prolonged prayers, chants, and what he called spiritual alignments. These alignments required physical closeness, which he justified as necessary to channel divine energy. The first ritual was deceptively simple. He prepared an anointing oil that he claimed was blessed with divine power. He anointed my forehead, hands, and belly while chanting prayers in a language I didn't understand. He instructed me to repeat after him and to close my eyes as he connected with the divine on my behalf. The session lasted about an hour, leaving me emotionally drained but hopeful. As the days turned into weeks, the rituals grew more elaborate. The second session required a fasting period of 3 days, during which I was only allowed water blessed by him. On the third day, I was instructed to wear a white gown and meet him at his office after sundown. The room where the ritual took place was another room I had not been before, dimly lit with candles and filled with the smell of burning incense. He circled me, sprinkling holy water and murmuring prayers. He told me to remain silent and to trust the process. When he placed his hands on my belly, I felt a wave of heat surge through my body. He assured me this was a sign of the dark forces being weakened. My brother, I am not proud of what I am saying or telling you. But I must for the sake of someone out there. The third ritual marked a turning point. He informed me that the attacks on my unborn child were intensifying and that we needed to escalate the spiritual work. This session required me to bring a personal item of mine. He specifically requested my wedding ring. He claimed it was to channel the bond of love and protect my family. He placed the ring in the center of a circle drawn with salt and surrounded it with lit candles. The prayers this time were louder, almost aggressive, and I was instructed to kneel in the circle while he walked around me, invoking spiritual entities for protection. By the end of the session, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. The subsequent rituals became increasingly invasive. Elijah introduced what he called spiritual alignments, which required physical contact. He explained that my body had to be in perfect harmony with divine energy to shield my baby effectively. These alignments began with simple touches on my shoulders and forehead but gradually progressed to more intimate areas. He justified it by saying, "The sanctity of your child's life requires complete openness to divine intervention." Each time, I felt a nagging discomfort, but I silenced my inner voice, too afraid to question him. The final ritual was the one that bound me completely. He declared that the dark forces had reached a critical point and that only a deep spiritual covenant could break their hold. He said the covenant required a sacred exchange, which he presented as an ultimate act of faith. His language was cryptic but compelling, and he spoke with an authority that made resistance feel like defiance against God himself. The ritual took place with even stricter secrecy than before. By this time, my mind was so clouded by fear and manipulation that I complied without question. He claimed that a deeper, more personal sacrifice was needed to seal the spiritual protection over my baby. When I hesitated, he reminded me of the stakes, painting a vivid picture of the harm that could befall my child if I refused. In my desperation, I capitulated. I allowed myself to believe that what he was asking was a divine mandate, a necessary act to ensure my baby's safety. The guilt was immediate and overwhelming after he had his way with me. I felt dirty, broken, and irreparably damaged. He, however, showed no remorse. He acted as though nothing out of the ordinary had happened, moving on to discuss the next steps of the supposed spiritual protection. My brother, looking back, I see how systematically he manipulated me, preying on my fears and exploiting my vulnerability. At the time, I couldn't see it. I was too blinded by my desperation to realize that I was being used. That one decision, born out of fear, set off a chain reaction that would destroy every aspect of my life. What followed was a whirlwind of shame, secrecy, and self-loathing. You see, my relationship with Daniel, already strained, began to crumble completely. The stress took a toll on my health and my pregnancy. The effects of these rituals began to ripple through my marriage. I became withdrawn and secretive, often making excuses to avoid spending time with Daniel. He had warned me against discussing the rituals with anyone, but this secrecy created an emotional wall between me and my husband. Daniel sensed that something was wrong, but whenever he asked, I dismissed his concerns, blaming my behavior on the stress of pregnancy. Our arguments became frequent and heated. Daniel grew frustrated with my evasiveness and began to accuse me of hiding something from him. He even questioned my sudden dependence on the pastor, which only fueled my paranoia. He had already planted seeds of doubt about Daniel, suggesting that his spiritual immaturity could jeopardize the protection we had worked so hard to build. I started to view my husband as an obstacle rather than a partner. The strain reached its peak when Daniel confronted me about the financial drain caused by my sessions with the pastor. I had been giving offerings and purchasing items for the rituals without consulting him, and it had begun to impact our budget. His frustration turned to suspicion, and he demanded to know the truth. I lashed out, accusing him of not trusting me or supporting my efforts to protect our child, maybe out of shame, knowing what has already happened between me and the pastor. The argument ended with him walking out of the house, slamming the door behind him. Our intimacy suffered as well. I avoided physical closeness, haunted by guilt and the invasive nature of the rituals. Daniel, feeling rejected and alienated, withdrew further. He even suggested at one point that we see a counselor, but I refused, convinced that no one could understand the spiritual battle I was facing. The breaking point came when Daniel discovered some of Elijah's messages on my phone. They were cryptic but suggestive, hinting at the personal nature of the rituals. Furious and heartbroken, Daniel confronted me, accusing me of betrayal. I couldn't deny it. The truth came spilling out, and the devastation on his face was unbearable. He packed a bag that night and left, saying he needed time to think. The next morning. At that moment, I realized the full extent of what I had lost. My marriage, my partner, and the life we had built together were all crumbling around me. I had allowed fear and manipulation to destroy everything I held dear, and now I was left to pick up the pieces of a shattered life. Yes, I did deliver the baby. You see, I delivered my baby prematurely, and while holding my fragile child in my arms, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had failed as a mother before the journey had even begun. It wasn't long before I learned that I wasn't the only woman Pastor Elijah had deceived. Other victims came forward, each with stories eerily similar to mine. When I confronted him, he dismissed me with chilling indifference, blaming me for my choices. "You came to me," he said. "I only gave you what you asked for." The weight of my mistakes drove me into a deep depression. I felt abandoned by God, betrayed by the faith I had clung to for solace. "You see, my brother, I agreed to share my story because I want to use me as an example and plead to my fellow women to really tread cautiously." Reason I am talking about women is because we normally fall victims as compared to our brothers. If you find yourself vulnerable, scared, or searching for answers, be careful where you place your trust. No human being should come between you and your relationship with God. True faith doesn't demand secrecy or fear. It uplifts, it heals, and it sets you free. I found peace, but it's a peace that came at a great cost. And I wouldn't want another person to go through such thing. My hope is that by sharing my journey, I can spare someone else the pain I endured. Let my story be a reminder: not every voice that claims to speak for God is worthy of your trust. Protect your heart, your mind, and your soul. They are precious beyond measure. Yes, I am still married to my husband. What happened was that I went to my mother-in-law and cried to her. Told her every bit of what happened. Maybe, she being a woman saw and understood where I was coming from. She promised to have a discussion with my husband, her son, and get back to me. So, she called also to my aunt, who is now more like a mother to me, because I lost both parents. They sat and talked about the whole issue. I was made to apologize and promised never to go down that lane again. At this point, they didn't even need to advise me. I had already gotten every advice I needed from what had happened to me. And so, my husband and I were able to sort out our differences, and now we are one. Slowly, we started to mend our relationship, piece by fragile piece.
Don't forget to please subscribe, share and like our videos. Kindly hit the notification bell so you will be the first to get notification to our videos when we upload. We do not do this to shame others but to warn the innocent ones that the devil doesn't come with horns and a pitchfork, just like our sister said. He comes dressed as everything you've ever wanted. So, to those listening, stay vigilant. Pray for discernment. And remember, no earthly reward is worth your soul. She said something profound that, if you find yourself vulnerable, scared, or searching for answers, be careful where you place your trust. No human being should come between you and your relationship with God. True faith doesn't demand secrecy or fear. It uplifts, it heals, and it sets you free. By sharing this journey, we hope it can spare someone else the pain our sister endured. Let her story be a reminder that not every voice that claims to speak for God is worthy of your trust. Protect your heart, your mind, and your soul. They are precious beyond measure, just like she said. Let your inner man or spirit walk anytime you meet any man who tells you he or she is a man of God, so that you will be able to know the lies from the truth. You see, faith, when placed in the wrong hands, can also be a weapon, one that can destroy you. I beg you, brothers and sisters, ask questions. Pray for discernment. Test the spirits, as the Bible says. Do not let anyone guilt you into giving beyond your means or participating in things that feel wrong in your spirit. I hope that this will be a lesson etched in the hearts of those who dare to tread the fine line between faith and fanaticism. Stay safe. Stay vigilant. And always question the source of power before you place your trust in it. If you've ever been in a similar situation, or if you feel something's not right in your church or community, leave a comment below. Let's talk about it. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe for more true stories, because sometimes, the scariest things aren't the ones we see, they're the ones we don't.